Darren, of all the people you know in this world,
Yes.
which is a lot, does anybody listen to more podcasts than I do?
No, not a single person. And there's not even a person on earth
Okay.
that does that. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that was a quick answer. So the man we're talking to today was my gateway drug to the podcast world.
I love the way you say that.
The man we're talking to today, you can blame
Yeah.
for my obsession with podcasts. Let me tell you a quick story, and we'll get to you in a second. I'm sure you're eager to hear this as well. So 2018, I was late to the podcast game. I mean, podcasts have been around for a long time, but I had never listened to them. Never really got into that world. But in 2018, I stumbled on a podcast called Finding Mastery, and I don't even remember how I did it. I think probably somebody shared it with me, something like that. And the first episode I listened to was with the founder of Hurley. Do you know what Hurley is?
Yeah.
The clothing brand.
Clothing, yeah.
Bob Hurley. And then the next episode on this Finding Mastery podcast was with our friend Rich Froning, who we've had on the podcast. And I was hooked, man. It was instant. And not only was I hooked because of the two guests, Bob Hurley and Rich Froning, great stories,
Right.
but the host is what captured me.
Yeah.
His thought-provoking ability to ask questions. It was this new world that I hadn't experienced before, of this conversation that I got to be a part of. Even though I wasn't there, I got to be a part of it. And of course, that host, after that long-winded intro,
Yeah. Give it to us.
is Dr. Michael Gervais. And if you can't hear it in my voice, I'm maybe the most
both of
excited
us.
I've been
Yeah.
for this podcast.
Both of us.
because
And I've got a list. You know what? Doc, I'm going to call him Doc. I got to
that's so
call him Doc.
disrespectful.
I have
So
to, man. I
disrespectful.
can't. That's respect. That's respect in the sports world because he's got the education. Doc, look, man, there are so many questions that I have for you. I mean, so be prepared for today because it's coming from a guy who played 13 years in the NFL, but also as a business owner. And I just need to pick your brain on some things. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners, I'm going to do them a huge favor today by asking these questions.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Dr. Gervais, if you're not familiar with him, is a high-performance sports psychologist or high-performance psychologist, maybe in the sports world as well. How are you today, sir?
How fun. You guys are on fire, and I feel stoked to be here as well. And so thank you for that intro. It means a lot, probably more than you know. And so I'm stoked to be here with you. Fire away.
Yes.
Let's roll up our sleeves and get into really what it means to.
Absolutely. We know we're somewhat limited on time today, so we're gonna get into the hard hitting questions here in a bit. But we do want to understand where you come from, a little bit about your background, a little bit about your story. That's how we like to set up all of our conversations, to give a little context to people and who they're listening to. So take us back to the beginning, where you're from, what family life was like. Just take us back and tell us about that.
Yeah, cool. So I'll do a long kind of story very short in a short amount of time. Is that I grew up on a farm in Virginia, and so my parents dropped out. So this is in the 70s. They dropped out from the corporate life that they were heading into, and they're like, we're not doing it like this. And so they I don't know how they did it, but they bought this. It was really cheap with dirt roads, no street lights. Running water was a luxury in the winter, and so they scraped some pennies together, call it a farm. It's not what you're thinking. Like it was just like, yeah. And so I grew up there from years. I think we left there like when I was 12, and so when I say hillbilly, I mean hillbilly. Okay? So, but it was hillbilly with like it sounds so backwards when I say that, but it was flower power type of stuff. When my parents were true hippies, and they're like, listen, let's just get reconnected to nature. So Mother Nature taught me a lot at a young kid. If I didn't get back to the house before the sun went down,
right,
it was dangerous. It was scary. It scared the shit out of me. So I knew I needed to be attuned to Mother Nature. And so then my dad, he's got a better sense of himself and got a job in the corporate world. We moved over to California. And talk about being a fish out of water. I showed up like Like I was in a different planet. And so I had to learn quickly how to figure out how this social world works. And I got in a bunch of fistfights because I didn't know any better, and I just spoke the truth. And people were like, "That's corny," and I was like, "What do you mean I'm corny?" And so like that thing happened in the middle school, and I come home and my folks were like, "How was it first day?" And I was like, "Great." Like, what have I done in my life? And then and I do think like I'm a pacifist at this point in my life, but I do think that like I don't want to hurt I don't want to hurt anything really. You know, like I've just gotten into this different phase of my life for a lot of reasons, but I do think there's value in squaring up. I think there's value in dropping your hips and like looking somebody in the eye and saying, "Okay, I'm not moving." You know, I think I learned something about that transition years where it was hard and difficult, and so that was an important kind of phase. So Mother Nature to that transition of not knowing how like kids really work in suburbs, and then I found surfing and motocross, and then I found skateboarding.
Oh, you became all West Coast then after that, didn't you?
100%. And you know what happened? I think you'll probably appreciate this is that so sport is a great kind of place to figure out social and to have some fun and, you know, express yourself in ways. And I went into sport at a young age and I was like, I don't get it. These adults are screaming at me. And what are these lines? Why do we have to keep the ball with soccer? Why do we have to keep the ball inside the lines? And it was all these man-made rules and adults screaming at kids. And I was like, this is whack. And so I went back to Mother Nature stuff where if I didn't have my stuff together, if I didn't have my mind right, I'd leave skin on the asphalt. I'd be held under in, you know, a big wave where it was like scary. And motocross, you know, the margins of error there are real as well. So I just was more attracted to natural consequences and that sense of feeling like I determine the risk. Right. I determine how I'm going to relate to Mother Nature. And if you get it right, the shit's great.
Yeah.
No, right. It's like, wow, there's very few powers like that. And so anyways, so that's how it started. And then quick story to just wrap it up is that I couldn't put it together. I was 15 years old, perfect conditions, competitive surfing opportunity. Usually there's like 35 folks out paddling and fighting for waves. And, you know, it's about 3 to 5 waves an hour, you know, so it's super competitive, you know, that people are trying to get. And this is a competition setting where there's 3 people out. Waves are beautifully, it's about 6 foot, perfect glass. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. And the only difference is that there's judges and there's people on the beach watching. I'll be damned if I didn't just implode. And like, you know, and it was every time. And so my skill didn't change. My technical or physical skills didn't change, but my mind did. And so I'm out there paddling, and there was an older gentleman that I was competing against, and you know, he was like in his 20s, and he says, "Gervais, I see you out here every day, and I'm watching you in this heat, and you're a mess." He said, "You just got to stop worrying about what could go wrong." And then he paddled off. I was like, holy shit, like, yeah, how does he know? That's all I'm thinking about. And so he didn't tell me how to solve it, but that was the beginnings of me going, oh, this mental part of the game is really important. So that kind of started the whole thing for me.
So how old were you at this time?
I was 15.
You're 15, yeah. And that's not, I mean, that's normal. I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of normal. I think even at, you know, in my lifetime as a young kid, I mean, I had doubts, and some of the doubts were when people were watching. It was the craziest thing. When I was a kid, I could know a test and be prepared, and then on test day on Friday when everybody was there, I'm blowing it. Like I just blank and can't remember shit. But it was specific. But I could play in a football game or a basketball game where hundreds of people are there, and I'm on fire. Like I want to show off because of the people are there or are sitting there watching. It was just, you know, it just depended on what it was, the situation was.
Well, that's cool. So I didn't have what you had. You know,
I didn't either.
You didn't have it either?
I did not. Yeah. I was like you, very in my head in performance opportunities. I
think we're now at a different place where, so when I was in the league for about 9 years, the first draft class that would come in, the kids would be like, I would ask them, and kids, the college graduates or finishing up college.
Kids.
I would say,
yeah, you're right. Kids.
yeah. And I'd say, so tell me about the mental part of the game. And they go, oh yeah, that's important. And I go, okay, so what are you doing with it? And they go, well, what do you mean? And it's like, oh, okay. All right. So about 3 years in, and this was like, let's see, what year are we? 2022. This is probably 2013, 14. And then the kids started saying, oh, you mean like imagery? Yeah, we kind of know about that. Coach talked to us a little bit at college. And then the last handful of years, kids that were coming in out of the draft were like, oh yeah, no, we do imagery, 6 minutes a day, pre-post, Yeah, we got our goals written down. Yeah, self-talk. Yeah, I'm on it. I know how to speak to myself. I'm like, God damn, all right. So it's coming. And the industry of training the mind inside of sport is about 10 years ahead of training the mind inside of business. And it's starting to happen in really cool ways in sport right now, at least in elite sport. So
go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, so you're sitting there on the surfboard at 15 and you have this aha moment aided by, a friend of yours. I'm assuming that was your first moment of realization that you, or at least the clarity that I struggle with this. It's one thing to know that you're struggling. It's another thing to know what to do with that. So how did you start to fix yourself or start to improve that part of your game?
Well, okay, that's a cool question. And no one's asked that question. So in that moment, I sat there for, a couple beats and I was like, how did he know? And I said, yeah, so it's not working that I'm thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And I was so nervous, like I couldn't feel my feet. I felt like my legs were different. My arms were like weaker. And it's all the physiological things that come with that fight flight mode, where literally you're in a different body, right? Because you're preparing for the greatest danger that you could face, even though it's something I love doing.
Right.
And so I, 1 beat, 2 beat, 3 beat. Well, damn, that's not working. So why don't I start thinking about what I want to have happen? And that was like this innocent 15-year-old kid going, well, let me just flip it. And flipping the script is something we talk about all the time, but psychologically, from a science perspective, it's called reframing. So you're doing some gymnastics with your mind to flip exactly how you're imagining your future. And if you can be disciplined, come to find out, if you can be uncommonly disciplined about using your mind to see and feel how you want to show up and be, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do underneath the surface to make that be consistent. If you can be disciplined in that way to use your mind as an asset, you start to play in life as opposed to feel like you're on your heels. And so it kind of happened in that moment where I started seeing myself surfing the way I wanted to surf, the way I knew I could surf. I was like, oh my God, there's something to it.
Yeah.
That's wisdom. To be able to flip your mentality that quick in that moment.
That's a skill, and that can be taught. We can all, like, what was it, like 15 years ago, if you ask a strength coach, can you make someone faster? They're like, yeah, that's how I make my living. What do you mean? But 30 years ago, you ask a head coach, can you make someone faster or jump higher? They're like, you're just born with speed.
Yeah. But you said something there that really brought back memories of why, and Ben knows this. I talk to myself a lot, but it started out of fear. It started in the fact that, I was in school and we moved a lot, and I was always similar to you. I used to get into these fights, and I can remember talking to myself before the bell rung at 3 p.m., knowing that I was going to walk out of this classroom and I was going to go across the street, across this place called the RJ's Liquor Store, and I was going to have to fight. Right. And it's like mentally from 9 o'clock in the morning, knowing this is going to happen, I'm playing it in my mind, and I'm probably talking to myself the whole time. But I remember that. But then some of the same, that's almost like it flipped to a positive of mine, because even in game situations, I'm talking to myself before. I'm always it's like a hype video. Like my mind will not stop hyping myself to be, who I am. And it's been, it went from fear to I was using it in a good way and had no idea.
Yeah. So Darren, like, this is why you were in the league and did what you did, because you had the awareness of how your mind worked. And then 2, you used it to build images and literally laid tracks, neurological tracks, to familiarize your brain, your neurological system, and your mind about what greatness looked like. And so that skill is, we often overlook, kind of throw it away, like, oh yeah, I do imagery, but to do it in a disciplined way might be one of the more powerful skills that we know, and we don't really know how it works. We don't really know how the brain works yet. We've got, a decent understanding, but it's a relatively new science. But so sports psychology, Darren, came from studying people like you. How do the greats do it? And so, 30 years ago, your contemporaries were teaching us exactly that. So that's awesome.
So here I'm thinking this whole time I was fucking crazy. Like I'm just absolutely crazy for talking.
You are crazy. You are crazy.
I know.
As a tackle, there's you guys are a little different. Right? Let's be honest. Like, you can walk through a locker room. How about it? You can tell who the tackles are. You can tell who the O-line is.
Yeah.
But it's really funny. Like, not that you could profile any of it, but like the cleanliness on the
yeah,
right?
Yes. Yes. O-line are just sloppy. They're chewing tobacco, spitting it all over the place. Cups are spilt over. Yeah.
Safeties are prima donnas and the high.
Yeah, we are. Safeties are. We are. Yeah, so true. So true.
Not really. But back to your story, because you said something a second ago while you're on that surfboard, and I hate to linger too long, but I'm just fascinated by this moment of yours. You said, and I'm assuming this is a bug in our system as opposed to a feature. You said, even though it's something you enjoy doing, you just couldn't get over that fear until you flipped it. Can you expand on that? Why is that part of our, the way we react to things? Even so, when it's something we can enjoy, why does that fear response come so prevalent to a lot of us?
Our brain is designed. So our brain is millions of years old, and it hasn't adapted to modern technology yet. It hasn't adapted to even modern scenarios. So the brain is the 3.2 pounds of tissue that sits inside your skull. And think about that like the hardware that's running the show. And it's constantly gathering information from your fingertips to your eyes to your auditory system. It's constantly gathering information from the external world and from itself. It's monitoring itself. And its prime dictum is to scan the world and find all the threats, to find the dangers, because its dictum is to stay alive. And so your ancestry and my ancestry passed that down, and it's strong, because without that dictum, we're not going to be here. And so that is so strong and so old that there's a very predictable cascade that takes place as soon as we interpret something to be a potential threat. Now, it could be a real threat or a perceived threat. And we don't have the luxury to say, in that bush, is that a saber tooth or is that a rabbit? So if we just know in the bush there are saber tooths out here that we got to fire up. And so now what happens, we're not running from saber tooths anymore. We are figuring out how threats of the modern world are. And the modern world, the great threat in the modern world are other humans. And, so I'm not talking about the predatory part of the human experience. I'm talking about the access that humans have to make our life harder or easier. And so this is why when we scan the world around us and we're looking to see if we're socially okay, and we all have this internal meter, it's called the sociometer. And the sociometer is basically scanning the world constantly, not just once, but constantly scanning. Am I okay? Did they think I'm okay? Are we okay here? Am I still okay? Because if you don't like me and you have power or access, you can kick me out. And if you kick me out of the tribe, then at some point, our ancient brain said, kicked out of the tribe, that's sure death. Because you can't hunt, gather, provide for your family and your kids and figure it all out with a small tribe of 4 people.
So opinions have become the saber-toothed tiger. Is that what you're saying?
How about it? Even glances, right? Like
yeah.
the made-up opinion. Even when somebody doesn't say something, but you look at them and you say to yourself, I don't think they like what I just said, or what I'm wearing, or what I didn't say.
Yeah.
And it's this constant internal mechanism that we are trying to calibrate if we're okay, and it's exhausting. And it's the same circuitry and center in the brain that is responsible for wrestling a bear, running from a saber tooth, figuring out how to get out of, a dark alley with somebody that's got, bad intentions. All that circuitry is alive when we walk into, on stage, a boardroom, sometimes our living room, and we're scanning to go, wait, hold on, this doesn't feel right. This is different now. Oh, my reputation and my sense of my safety is at stake. So it's complicated, but that's what's happening for most people. That's why one of the reasons we're exhausted.
Yeah. Well, and we've ramped that up with the social media use too. So not only now is it people that I'm associated with in person, now I've got millions of people online as well that can judge me, that can give me that feedback.
And I think maybe more importantly, like when you post something or, maybe they give you some feedback or some judgment or critique, but I think most people care less about that and care more about, unfortunately, well, what does Darren's life look like?
Yeah.
What is Joey's life? What is Susie's? Oh Susie's on a yacht? Okay. Like Susie just bought a yacht? Wow. And I'm still rowing on my dinghy. So there's that comparison thing that it's not so much, are they going to critique me, which is true. You're right on with it. The second layer and deeper layer, I think, is I'm watching other people and feeling like I don't hold up.
Yeah, we're seeing that in a lot of our kids. Like I'm seeing that, and especially when, social media over the last 10, 15 years, with, with 4 kids, just watching them. Well, they didn't get invited to the movies and they're seeing it on social media, and now it's like meltdown hour, and that, I think there's a lot of that, but I think over the years, it probably, without social media, that's been a part of our intake, hasn't it? I mean, this is not like something just new is happening. That's just the human makeup, isn't it?
It is. And Darren, when was the last time, when did you retire?
In 2005.
Okay. So I think you were outside of this, where you walk into a locker room now and halftime, people are checking their phones.
Wow.
Yeah. So to the point that it needs to be addressed. So it'd be hard to walk into a locker room probably this year where people would be on their phones, because a handful of years ago, people were doing it and now it's being addressed. But right after the game, you know exactly what's happening.
They're on Twitter.
On Twitter, checking out like highlights. What are people saying? And so it's the external calibration that is dangerous. So if I am offloading my sense of worth and value and esteem and confidence to you, and now my sense of self I've externalized it to somebody else, I've lost the ability to have an internal calibration. Check data to see if we slept well. We check other people to see if we are okay, as opposed to, this is why mindfulness, meditation, journaling, psychology, sitting in a room with somebody that only is focused on you being better, those 3 are designed to help you reestablish that sense of internal calibration. And the most powerful people, check me on this if you guys think I'm off base here. I think the most powerful people on the planet are the ones that say, I determine my experience. I can look at you and have great love. I could even, so this is me now, my bias. I want to love other people and not give a shit what they think of me. And so if I can do that, I feel like I decide how I'm going to experience life. If the external world around me is falling apart, if people are like angry or pissed off or whatever, can I maintain my sense of dignity and peace? So, but we can't get there if we don't have the skills or the ability to calibrate our internal state.
Yeah. I want to take a quick break and thank our partners, Sleep Number, and highlight a couple of things they're doing. Guys, these Sleep Number beds are unreal. The technology that they've created, the feedback that it gives you on your sleep. I've got the app opened up right here. They tell you things like your heart rate variability, your breathing rate, all these type metrics and feedback to give you so that you can improve your quality of sleep. They're all over the place. You can go and check yourself out at Sleep Number store wherever you live. Go to sleepnumber.com as well. They've got great resources on there. We just talked about this not too long ago. They have a whole blog section, all these articles, things that you can improve your health. Sleep Number is definitely changing the game when it comes to bedding. So get yourself to Sleep Number, get yourself to sleepnumber.com and check them out. Now back to the episode. Yes, so let's talk about that in your journey. So you have this moment on the surfboard, and then you go through the next however long learning these skills. Where did you go from there? How did you get into ultimately what you're doing today?
I barely got out of high school. And you guys are bringing stuff out that I don't talk about much. So I barely got out of high school because I spent way more time doing things that I loved and I didn't love at that point, learning. And so my parents pulled me aside, and this was like, I'm in my kitchen with them. It was my mom, actually, not my dad was relatively absent. He was turned into a workaholic from a drug addict, drinking and just kind of not hard drugs, but like smoking or whatever. But that's just an absent nature with a high emotional volatility, right? When you grow up, when someone's got an addiction, and then the addiction turned into workaholism. So it was my mom, she pulls me aside and she says, we tried. She's kind of full with like emotions. And she says, we didn't go to college. We didn't know how to help you navigate. Mike, you're difficult, but a good kid. And, you got to make a decision now. It's like, what's happening? This is my senior year. I didn't go to my SAT. I didn't go to any of that stuff. I just blew it off to go surfing. And they said, you got to make a decision. Or she said, you got to make a decision, either get a job and get out or go to junior college. And I thought, like, junior college, isn't that where the losers go?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was literally about to say that.
You guys went to junior college.
No, that was my stereotype too.
Yeah, you guys had it put together. And I was like, well, I'm not ready for a job and all that thing. So, but I knew I could put them together. I knew I could surf and say I went to school. And I knew I could just kind of do that for a while. So I said, all right, I'll do it. And then there was 3 professors, and I love bringing up their names: Dr. Kuzio, Dr. Zenka, and Dr. Perkins, philosopher, theologian, and psychologist. And they were best friends. And it sounds like I'm setting up a bad joke, but they saw me coming, and they're like, hey, kid, we want to show you like how this stuff works. Like you ask good questions. And I was like, okay, cool. And I thought I could just use it for surfing. And I come to find out like this invisible world that is involved with all humans, psychology and, philosophy is like complicated, and it's always available, meaning that it's in you, it's in me. And every human alive has a mind like, wow, I want to be great with mine. And I didn't even think I was going to help anyone else do it. So that's when it started to turn. And then from that point, it was my second semester in college. I read, on the end of a syllabus, and they say, these are some recommended books.
Yeah.
And most of the time you're just barely reading the one book, I guess, the textbook. I was reading everything, and the shit just caught on fire. And I loved it. And so I wrapped up that school and went to, which was Loyola Marymount, graduated from there, and then went to Pepperdine, got a master's degree transferred out from traditional psychology to sports psychology. So I got my master's from Long Beach and went back to San Diego, got a PhD in psychology, licensed specialization in sport and performance, and then found myself back in locker rooms. I found myself in locker rooms. Like, you guys will appreciate this. I was like, this is not where I belong. And wow. This is 19, what is this? No, this is like early 2000. And I was like, these people are full of shit. I was right. This is about narcissism. This is about like made up rules and like adults now yelling at like 20-year-olds. I go, this is crazy. And I wasn't really valued in those environments in the early 2000. The coach wanted me there, but the players didn't really. And there was like maybe 3. This was hockey. It was like 3 out of 30 athletes that were like, oh, I like this. And that would fill my bucket up. And I'm like, this is just a waste of my time. And I sound so jaded when I say it, but remember, I was like this punk kid that, I needed to be off access. I needed to do it, quote unquote, the the adventure way. So that's where I found myself reconnecting into action and adventure sports. And I spent about 10 years in the backcountry working with the most radical risk takers on the planet, where these guys would pack their bags. If they're going to go do something, you know, backcountry mountain stuff, they pack their bags. The morning they put up a tent, you know, wherever kind of the base camp is, from like a ski adventure or something. They're going to ski a line that's never been skied before. And they would pack their bags in the morning so that if they didn't make it and they died, that their friend wouldn't have to pack up their shit.
Oh, wow.
So the honesty and the purity and the full command and the full interest in getting my craft, my body, and my mind right was like, it was just that. It was just honest, because nature doesn't play. And so I was in that environment for about 10 years. And then a mutual friend put together a dinner with Coach Carroll, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And it was just a great dinner. He's like, I'm trying to do it differently. And, you know, love for you to come up and see kind of what it looks like and feels like. And I was like, yeah, this is a great dinner. I'd love to just see what you're doing. I had no interest in going back into a locker room experience.
Man, that's interesting. That is, I mean, so let me ask you, what was their thought process? What were they, you were there, but what were the questions? Because, I mean, look, I get in the locker room, I get some of the questions that might be asked of you. But out there, when you're outside out there, and these guys are just, you know, they're adventurers, man, and you know it's life or death. I mean, what are some of the questions that they're asking you? What are you doing to lift them up or get their mind free?
Yeah, that's a cool question. So one of the projects that you might be familiar with, but I'll borrow it to tell a story, is the Red Bull Stratos program. So Felix Baumgartner was a gentleman who wanted to see if he could break the sound barrier without any support. So just his body to break the sound barrier. To do that, he had to go up to where there was near zero gravity. So he had to go up 130,000 feet, 24 miles up into the sky. And then he was just going to jump. And the brightest minds in aerospace weren't sure if when he passed the sonic kind of threshold and he, you know, broke the speed of sound, Mach 1, that if his arms and legs would remain intact. You know, like no one knew. And this was actually important for aerospace, because at that point they're like, I think we need to get to Mars. You know, we need to explore other colonization, you know, off this planet, because we're blowing it. Our planet is not going to survive at the rate that we're using it up. And so that was early days of the idea, like, we need to understand, if we're going to send people up into outer space and we need to pull the eject button, could somebody survive the fall down? So there was an aerospace bit, there was the radical adventure bit, and then they bring me in because 4 years into the project, tens of millions of dollars invested. Like, each suit that they were designing was like $2 million for him to withstand the temperature. And so tens of millions of dollars invested, greatest minds in aerospace. Technology is on point. He raises his hand in the airport as he's from Germany or Austria at that time, and he's flying in back and forth from the States to do the training. And he's at the airport at LAX, and he's crying, and he says, "Team, I can't do it. I'm fucking scared." And there's a whole documentary on it, so I'm not sharing something that I shouldn't be sharing, right? That's privileged. And so we thought the project was going to be scrubbed, and they said, all right, well, let's get you some support. So you know what they did? They got him somebody that was going to help him with his cardio.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, if you're scared in there and you're breathing heavy, let's just get your fitness right.
Yeah, let's get your heart rate down.
Yeah, right? This is how old and archaic, you know, some of the thinking is in the system, you know. And so he's like, okay, I'll try it. And he knew he needed to talk to a psychologist,
right?
You know, so that didn't work. And then they folded me into the project, and you know, the rest is history. But what we did that's a good emblem, Darren, for this idea, which is if you are designing your life to explore your potential, and I'm not talking about designing your life to make money or to look cool or to get a jersey, but you're designing your life to fundamentally understand what's possible for you, that we end up kind of all of us asking the same questions. And those questions, I bet you know the questions. Those questions are not different from one locker room to another. But when your life is on the line, if somebody makes a mistake or you make a mistake, it's just real. It's not like, oh, imagery? Okay, I guess I'll do that. Maybe pregame. He got one shot at it.
Yeah.
He in his mind, he saw that movie play out thousands of times with great detail, with great control before he actually stepped into the most hostile environment on the planet. Which if there's a hole in a suit, he dies. If there's some sort of oxygenation mishap that happens, he dies. If he goes into a flat spin, which he did, he dies. He got himself out of the flat spin, which was remarkable. So it's nothing that, Darren, you weren't interested in when you're playing, but it's just when your life is on the line or somebody else's life is in your hands, the responsibility is incredible. And so you do the work.
So many places my mind's going here. Yeah, I remember watching that and just seeing him flipping through the air and I mean, it was just unbelievable to watch. It's a different perspective, what you're saying here. Those that are in extreme sports or him, for instance, who his life was literally on the line, it's a different perspective that they have on life in general. And that's not an earth-breaking, observation. But is there a way to simulate for those of us that don't risk our lives? Is there a way for us to get that perspective and to be able to appreciate life overall and step back from the day-to-day?
Listen, if you're on the Commanders, the Washington Redskins at the time, coming across the middle, and Darren's squaring you up. Okay? Yeah, like those receivers, those receivers were figuring it out.
Yeah, you got them gator arms. You got them gators.
So. Gator arms. Yeah, they do. All of a sudden, everything gets real fast.
Yeah.
No, I was never scared of Darren across the middle.
Yes, you were. You would have been. Yes.
Oh my God, that's good. So, okay. So, is the question? Tell me the question again.
Maybe how do we keep in mind the overall perspective on life, and maybe get out of the day-to-day that we just get caught up into? How can we widen our perspective a little bit better?
Okay, that's cool. I like how you asked that, because having an interesting life is really valuable to your sense of being okay. And so if you've had a really interesting life, you can travel into other rooms with all of this experience. So that is one thing that doesn't get talked about often, is like explore in your unique own way, and so that you can understand humans better. You can understand human nature better, and you can understand yourself better. So that's one way to do it. That is it's not an easy path, though, because it requires a lot of time. I think what you're asking for more so, though, is from a psychological perspective, it's the process of self-discovery. And there's a whole host of things that you can do to know yourself better. One is traveling to foreign lands and to go into rooms that are, different than yours and understand, or whatever. Like there's that external self-discovery, but the internal self-discovery there's a couple key levers that we can pull on, which is to be incredibly clear with your first principles in life. So when you strip it down, what are the principles that matter above all? And if you can know what those are, let's say you've got 3, 4, 5 first principles, you're like, listen, if I got to square up, or if I've got to give in to some experience, I'm making sure that these 4 principles or these 2 principles I'm being honest with. And most people don't do that work. And so it feels like they've got a philosophy of life that is a bit like a junkyard. is kind of, you turn around the corner and there's a cliche that kind of, it's kind of interesting and it'll hold up for a little bit, and you turn another corner in the junkyard and there's another interesting cliche or philosophy that you're using. And, this is why 50% of marriages end up in divorce in the United States, because the philosophy, they say the words, to in front of their loved one, in front of their community, in front of God, if it's a spiritual practice, and they say the words, but they haven't metabolized them to be first principles. And so whether it's Dr. King Jr. or somebody else that has a tone about equality and freedom, is that we know Dr. King Jr.'s first principle. Everywhere he went, he talked about it. He died for it. He lived for it. And he was very clear. And so what one man can do, so can another. So we know what Gandhi's first principles are. We know Mother Teresa's first principles, because everything she spoke about and her actions were in a complete alignment. And she didn't have any PR firm following her around. She just did that work, and she's maybe one of the most famous people ever, because the work she did was radical. So it's a long narrative of saying what they did is they knew their first principles, and then they had complete alignment in their life about them. And that's available to all of us. And you do that internal work, the rooms you go into get significantly easier to be in, because you know what your principles are. And then if you can map that to your purpose, and that's another big word. So first principles and purpose. And if I were to ask you guys, like, what is your life purpose? Most people, this is not to put anyone on the spot, but most people go, I'm still working on it. It feels really big. I'm not quite sure. Or like, how do you know your purpose? Most people haven't done the work yet. And once you can put first principles and purpose together, oh, wow, now 1 and 1 equals not 2, but like 11. And so those two are really important. And then the third one to know is, what are the character virtues that define your style? So let's go back to Dr. King, and Malcolm X and Dr. King are just easy to, their body of work is radical, and they had very different styles.
Absolutely.
Right. And so first principles were probably the same. Style was very different. And so what is your unique style? So we talk about like your character virtues. And so if you get those three, like that little triangle, purpose, philosophy, and then knowing your character values, and nobody can give you any of these. You have to sit and think or write or talk it out with somebody. And I can't give you your purpose. Nobody else can give you your purpose. You've got to say, this is my life purpose. And we walk around, guys, like we've got this, in sport, there's a shot clock, right? In just about every sport. And we walk around life like there's no shot clock.
All right, man.
Like when I say goodbye to you guys, not to get weird, I don't know if I'll ever get to see you again. And so when I say goodbye, I'm going to mean it in a way, which is like, I'm wishing your life to be great. And because I don't know if I'm going to see you again. And so, and if we do, we'll have a beer, a glass of tea or something. It'll be fun, but like, I don't, and I say it to my wife and my son, like, I don't know if I'm going to see you again. So when I say goodbye, I square up to it. I'm like, okay, I hope your life is great.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
All right, I want to take a quick minute to talk about our partner, Choctaw Casino and Resort. We are really, really humbled and grateful to be a partner for them. If you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you've heard how great the resort is there, how great the casino is, the new expansion. They've doubled in size, 3,000 new slots. They've got unbelievable sports bar. They've got unbelievable restaurants, unbelievable movie theaters, arcades for kids. It is endless, the things that they've not only improved but added. But it's just the experience that they provide is second to none. Choctaw Nation has done an incredible job with the community, with philanthropy, with support. They have just done incredible things. So we are extremely humbled and grateful to partner with Choctaw Casino and Resort. Make sure, I know you know it, but it's just a short drive up 75. Go check them out. And now back to the episode.
Doc, I know we only have a few minutes. I want to get into some of the things that, I saw you speak one time and you talked about pain and suffering and the difference. between the two. Give me your thoughts on, specifically when we're talking about going through or trying to reach your goals. Give me what pain and suffering mean to you.
Okay, so suffering is a very technical term. And suffering is, I have something that I don't want, or I don't have something I do want. And that excessive rumination around those two things leads to a life of suffering. So pain is different. There's different types of pain. There's like an acute pain and there's chronic pain. But pain is me dealing with something that is sharp or enduring, that is difficult to manage. Suffering, in comparison, is I have something I don't want, or I have something I do want. And it's this loop that I put myself in, because that suffering is psychological. And pain is emotional and psychological and physical. So pain is the reason we change. If you square up with your pain, you get really honest with your pain. Pain is the reason we change. Uncomfortableness is how we grow. So you feel that temporary like lactic acid in your muscles and you're getting some adaptation. You feel that emotional uncomfortableness because you say the thing that is truthful in a vulnerable, maybe kind way or whatever. And it's like that vulnerability creates the space to take the risk, and that risk is how we grow. So uncomfortableness is how we grow. Pain is the reason we change. Most people numb their pain. They don't want to square up with it. They blame other people. They drink it, drug it, sex it. They do something to not feel the pain because it's very fucking hard. And so they don't really change. Uncomfortableness is like, it's so much more easy to deal with uncomfortableness. And both of you guys understand uncomfortableness. Both of you had some injuries.
Right.
So you understand pain. Now, suffering is unique because it literally is a psychological bit that has physical and emotional components to it, but it's very specific what suffering means. I have something I don't want. Like I have an extra 10 pounds, or I have an ugly face, or I have, some sort of something. I have something I don't want.
Right.
Or I have something, I don't have what I do want. Like I don't have that they have. That is suffering.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. What about, I'm sure you've had this conversation hundreds of times, and this is something we've ping-ponged to each other before, but would love to get your take. Identity. We play ball, and we get so wrapped up in that identity of being a football player or an athlete. And then you leave the game, or the game leaves you, and it's just an abrupt stop. And again, I'm not telling anything you never heard before. So I'm just curious how you help coach people through, and this could be anybody, whatever they feel they see their identity in. But how do you coach people through that?
Did the game leave you guys, or did you guys leave the game?
Game left me 2005 back surgery, second back surgery, nerve damage, and had drop foot. Couldn't do it again. I just mentally, that would have been my 11th surgery, that the game left me.
Yeah. Drop foot that's no joke.
No. Yeah.
Did you get the feeling back in your foot?
Yeah, got it back in about a year and a half. Nerve regenerated, and I was back, and could have came back. Honestly, could have came back. Parcells called me back, and I just mentally, I had checked out. I was gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really scary thing to think, like, I can't lift my foot right.
Yes.
Like walking weird, and there's it's a significant injury.
Yes.
So, okay. How about for you?
It's a complicated answer, but I left the game. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
An injury, I like to give the excuse that an injury ended it, but it was really me walking away.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm curious why.
So
most people don't.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Most people don't. Most people get kicked out of the party.
Yeah.
No, and I did. Essentially, that's what it ended up being. It was a knee injury last year in college. Could have kept potentially pursuing it, but I was not mentally tough enough in the moment at the time to continue doing it. It was, it's a whole nother episode going down that route. So
yeah, no, I feel you. Okay, cool. So, but the question is like identity, right? And so here's some deep work to do. And it's not, what I'm going to say is going to sound easy, but it's actually quite complicated to do. And it's available for everyone. And when you do it, the freedom is right on the other side, which is to decouple who you are from what you do. So if you did that earlier work we were talking about, the self-discovery, that really is who you are. What are my first principles? What's my purpose in life? And what is my unique style? What are the virtues that I'm going to be true to? That is in essence like at the center of who you are. And then what you do is, I don't know, widget maker, athlete, psychologist, whatever it might be. And that if you let what you do define who you are, that goes back to almost the first thing we talked about, which is the externalization of your identity. And it's so dangerous. When you go to a party, it's like the least favorite question for you probably, and for me as well, is like, tell me what you do. And it's almost like they say, oh, I'm an artist or I'm an athlete. And I think that I'm an athlete is a very dangerous statement. Because now athleticism has defined identity. I am an athlete. Right. And so that will get you really good. How about it, Ben? That'll get you good. But that likely you won't find freedom in it. Right. Because when you say I am an athlete, like you burn the boats a bit and you're like, I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician, I'm not a business person, right. I'm not a father, I'm not a husband. So I burned all of my other roles to say, this is the role that I am, this is the way I want you to know me. And then when I step on the field, my identity is now at stake.
Right. Right.
It's not just the game, win, loss. Yep. My entire identity is at risk. And that's why we overcomplicate mistakes and winning and losing. So you decouple who you are from what you do. And once you know who you are, nobody can take that away from you.
Right.
Once you know exactly who you are, the external environments that you go into are opportunities to express it.
Right.
Right. Share it, be it. And so, I don't know. So it sounds easy. It's actually quite complicated to rip those two things apart.
Sure, sure.
And it's one of the reasons that, the practice of mindfulness and meditation have been around 2,600 years, 2,600 years. And like, we're throwing it around like it's a buzzword the last 5 years, but it's been around a long time. One of the most ancient practices of mindfulness is you get your ass on a cushion, you quiet your mind or relax your body so you don't have all that external or internal noise kind of bugging you. And then you just explore this thought stem. Who am I? And watch where you go.
Right.
And, and sometimes you go to dark places. And sometimes you go to places that are like mechanical. And sometimes you go, I have no idea. And that's a little scary. And sometimes you go, you know what? I'm so much more than this physical frame. I'm so much more than, my mind even. And there's an expansion that takes place. So that type of deep work, who am I, is the process to decouple, I am different than what I do. And the best in the world right now are flipping the model. And they're saying, I don't need to do the extraordinary to be extraordinary. What I need to do is I don't need to do more to be more. I need to flip it and I need to be more present, be more grounded, be more authentic, be more creative. And when I can do all of that being, then I let the doing flow from there. And that's where we start to get into like these exponential flywheel effect type of performance enhancements where it's like, I didn't even know I could do this. This is amazing, because you're no longer protecting your identity. You're simply responding and influencing the craft, whatever it is. So I in my head right now, I'm thinking this is super esoteric, but in my practice, it is so concrete that I hope I'm not just talking mumbo jumbo.
No, that's awesome.
That was perfect.
Doc, and I got a couple of things before we jump off here. You've worked with a lot of great, you said it, there's a lot of special people in this world, athletes, CEOs and whatnot. What is it? What is that quality? What is that one thing that you say that just jumps out to you when you're meeting someone that's just got this mindset of, I'm trying to get it done? What is it what's that one thing that they have?
That's a cool question. It actually what set me down this path. Like, is there a single thread of the greats? You know, like, is there a red thread? I haven't found one. So there are some commonalities amongst the half percenters, or even like the fractional half percenters. And so, unfortunately, you'd like to have them over for dinner once, but probably not after that. Okay. Because
I say that about Darren all the time.
oh my God. Because it's all about them. So that level of narcissism, that level of like over rotated to like all conversations come back to me, is the evidence of like how much they think about getting better and getting their needs met and doing life the way they want to do it. And so I think that holds up. I hope it changes in the next 10 years where we have a new model. And so we need leaders like you guys to show the way. But so that's one way to think about it. The other way is that they're really clear. They're really clear on what they're trying to build or do or solve. And they are relentless to the truth of it, to figure it out. And most of the ones that hold up over time, like the greats, that their body of work is legit. It's not like one-hit wonders. Is that the consistency comes from a place. And that place, like if I ask you guys, is that place at a neuroticism where they're just like trying to prove to mom or dad that they're okay? They're trying to prove like they matter, and they're using their business or they're using their sport to have the validation that they matter? Or are they really healthy? And they're like, no, this is like an amazing way to live life. And if it goes away tomorrow, like, it's okay. I'll figure out the next thing and it'll be great. So my experience has been most people at the top level are pretty neurotic.
Yeah.
And so there's a narcissism, a deep anxiety that comes with it, a needing to prove that I'm okay. And they've chipped all in at an early age. So there's a high level of fear that if it all goes away, they go away. And truth is, I don't know how you transitioned, Darren, after how many years were you in the league?
13. Yeah. I went from playing to ESPN and then into the commercial real estate world. And that's what I'm doing now. So I've gone through a ton of transitions, and you're right. I mean, I had to reinvent myself and get my ass kicked through a lot of different processes.
What was easier? Was real estate easier or was broadcasting easier?
Broadcasting by far, because I'm in the business of managing people now with my own company. I have two companies, that, software company and a real estate company, but it's, long story here, but more in I found out that I'm not as good on as far as managing people of both sexes. It's easy for me to manage people in the locker room. It's not as easy being in corporate America.
How about it? Yeah. Tell me if you think that this is crazy talk, but I don't think it's crazy. I think it's actually dangerous for me to say it, but I'd love to invite you guys into this dangerous world of my head. Is that I think locker rooms are some of the most honest rooms.
They are. Absolutely.
We're walking around naked, and so you get made fun of for every body part you have. You get right, like, so there's that level that is rare. And but you call people out, you square up with them, you hug them, you love them, you cry with them. There's a level of honesty that is really rare. Now I say that the reason I say it's dangerous is because like there's that kind of Cro-Magnon alpha insensitive tag that people think about, certain locker rooms. And I just compare that to the coach's room. And it's one of the most dishonest, political, gamesmanship, angled, power and control. Like, I don't know. I think that I'd love to get your thoughts on this, guys.
Yeah, I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I love about the locker room is, unlike corporate America, where the boss is hiring like-minded people, so it's a lot of people that are thinking the same thing, and the locker room is that, but it's a guy from small town West Texas next to a inner city Phoenix, completely different world than me, different perspective, different opinions. all together in one room, all working for a common goal. To me, there's no replication of that in the real world, of so many different various backgrounds that doesn't matter, black, white, straight, gay, doesn't matter to me. We're headed towards the same place. Yeah. And it's just such a diverse ecosystem of people.
I sent you a video, Ben, just yesterday, I think it was, of on Instagram, and it was the Washington Commanders quarterback, Heineke. Yeah. He's wearing the chains after the game. They just beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're on the bus or a train, whatever they're on, going back, and he's wearing the chains. And to hear the words that were being said in that video, it's like a glimpse of, what's going on behind the curtain. But the words and the language that was being spoken, black dudes saying things like in a locker room, like outside of that locker room, oh my God, everybody's like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. You can't say those things, but in that locker room, it exists. We just exist, and we don't even think anything of it. Like the words are coming out, and you're saying things, and you are family. Like that's my brother who's standing there and listening to this, and I'm telling you, I sent him the video because I just felt like this is the relationship that I have with him. I can say anything to him, and he won't be offended. And he's going to say whatever it is to me, and I will not be offended because you go through things and you just have this bond, a true bond. And I don't have that when I walk into my businesses. I have to be careful. It's almost like, and these are some of the conversations on leadership. I just want to have some of these conversations on, being intentional with my thoughts and how people are taking it sometimes. They get a little, they're combative because of my words or whatnot. So I'm like, those are the conversations that I'd love to have with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this is where you get into that two selves thing. So you hear, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, the two selves concept.
No.
Okay. No. So it's, you guys have both probably lived it, but maybe didn't have a way to describe it, but it's more common than we know. So the two selves concept is that my true self is version A, right? And it's kind of like the locker room, like the banter, the joking, the this, that, and the other, borderline disrespectful, but loving.
Right.
And all locker rooms can take different forms, of course.
Right.
I think I just described me. So anyways, so then you go into the other world, whatever that world is, and there's the second self. And the second self is I have to play a part to be approved. And so maybe that's like if I go into the room with the corporates or whatever, and it's exhausting. It is flat out exhausting. So what I've decided to do is just be a little bit more disciplined with some of my language so that I can be free in any room that I go to. So if I might have a little bit extra cursing in one room, but it's not going to fly in other rooms. So I'm not having to monitor myself. I'm just trying to find ways that I can travel in any room I go into and be about it. Right. Whatever my true self, what that is. So that two self thing is really hard on us. And the locker rooms are honest, but I'm not sure that the locker rooms I'm not sure that's how boardrooms are supposed to look or business are supposed to look either.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's some things that corporates have right. One of my friends is, he built a big business. I'll keep the name out, and he's a tastemaker, and so he's one of the cool kids, and he built a really big business, and it's California based. And we had breakfast, I don't know, it was about a month ago, and he says, "Mike, I just let go of one of my guys, and it's killing me." He's one of the core guys, and it's killing me. And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" He says, "Well, two things. One is I came in there, and we have a good relationship. And he's a little bit younger, and I've been mentoring him for a while. He comes in, and I came in. I said, 'Hey, listen, it's not working. We've had these conversations. It's just not working. You got to go.'" And the kid, he was 28, looked up at him and said, "Are you firing me?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Who's firing me?" He said, "I am. I'm the owner of the company." He said, okay, the owner of the company is firing me. For what reason? And my friend walked right into it. He said, poor performance. Like, you're not doing it. It's not cutting it anymore. He said, okay, thank you. Went and lawyered up. Didn't even have to get a good lawyer. Got 2.5 years of compensation, because in California, you can't fire somebody for poor performance. Well, I just take that back. You can, but you have to have this pretty radical, disciplined approach. And you can't just walk it. Like, you can go into a locker room and say, hey, listen, you've really got to, close the gap. You're getting beat on this route or whatever. And like, we got to work on this. And if you're going to have these missed tackles, whatever, we got to work on that. And if not, and so, right. And, but it's not like there's all these monitoring. It's just performance speaks for itself. So he lost 2.5 years of this guy's contract, and not including legal fees. So it's like, it's a different world. Like, employees, for some really good reasons, have a lot of power, but they scare the shit out of.
Yes, exactly.
You ain't kidding. You ain't kidding. Well, yeah, we're up against the clock here, and we apologize that we went a little over, but man, we could talk to you all day long. And
you guys are fun.
Yeah,
and I hear you just let your draw slip. I just heard it.
You just heard it? That's that West Texas in them right there. Did you hear that?
Yeah. I'm exploring
for 45 minutes.
I'm exploring who I really am. You're helping me discover who I really am. No, but man, thank you so much. We're going to continuing to be huge fans of yours. We love your message. We love your the way you teach and the way you your thoughtfulness and everything about you, man. It's just it's inspiring, and we appreciate you so much.
Together. Let's have some fun after this and maybe figure out a way that we can do something.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you guys.
All right.
Thanks again, Doc.
Thanks, everybody.